India and England. India, London, 1896. During the London season, Swami Vivekananda has been teaching and lecturing to considerable numbers of people who have been attracted by his doctrine and philosophy. Most English people fancy that England has the practical monopoly of missionary enterprise, almost unbroken, save for a small effort on the part of France. I therefore sought the Swami in his temporary home in South Belgravia to inquire what message India could possibly send to England, apart from the remonstrances she has too often had to make on the subject of home charges, judicial and executive functions combined in one person, the settlement of expenses connected with Sudanese and other expeditions. It is no new thing, said the Swami composedly, that India should send forth missionaries. She used to do so under the Emperor Ashoka in the days when the Buddhist faith was young, when she had something to teach the surrounding nation. Well, might one ask why she ever ceased doing so and why she has now begun again? She ceased because she grew selfish, forgot the principle that nations and individuals alike subsist and prosper by a system of give and take. Her mission to the world has always been the same. It is spiritual. The realm of introspective thought has been hers through all the ages. Abstract science, metaphysics, logic are her special domain. In reality, my mission to England is an outcome of England's to India. It has been hers to conquer, to govern, to use her knowledge of physical science to her advantage and ours. In trying to sum up India's contribution to the world, I am reminded of a Sanskrit and an English idiom. When you say a man dies, your phrase is, he gave up the ghost, whereas we say, he gave up the body. Similarly, you more than imply that the body is the chief part of man by saying it possesses a soul, whereas we say a man is a soul and possesses a body. These are but small ripples on the surface, yet they show the current of your national thought. I should like to remind you how Schopenhauer predicted that the influence of Indian philosophy upon Europe would be as momentous when it became well known as was the revival of Greek and Latin learning at the close of the Dark Ages. Oriental research is making great progress. A new world of ideas is opening to the seeker after truth. And is India finally to conquer her conquerors? Yes, in the world of ideas. England has the sword, the material world, as our Mohammedan conquerors had before her. Yet, Akbar the Great became practically a Hindu. Educated Mohammedans, the Sufis, are hardly to be distinguished from the Hindus. They do not eat beef, and in other ways conform to our usages. Their thought has become permeated by ours. So that is the fate you foresee for the lordly Sahib? Just at this moment, he seems to be a long way off it. No, it is not so remote as you imply. In the world of religious ideas, the Hindu and the Englishman have much in common, and there is proof of the same thing among other religious communities. Where the English ruler or civil servant has had any knowledge of India's literature, especially her philosophy, there exists the ground of a common sympathy, a territory constantly widening. It is not too much to say that only ignorance is the cause of that exclusive, sometimes even contemptuous, attitude assumed by some. Yes, it is the measure of folly. Will you say why you went to America rather than to England on your mission? That was a mere accident, a result of the World's Parliament of Religions being held in Chicago at the time of the World's Fair instead of in London, as it ought to have been. The Raja of Mysore and some other friends sent me to America as the Hindu representative. I stayed there 3 years, with the exception of last summer and this summer, when I came to lecture in London. The Americans are a great people, with a future before them. I admire them very much, and found many kind friends among them. They are less prejudiced than the English, more ready to weigh and examine a new idea, to value it in spite of its newness. They are most hospitable too. Far less time is lost in showing one's credentials, as it were. You travel in America, as I did, from city to city, always lecturing among friends. I saw Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, Des Moines, Memphis, and numbers of other places. And leaving disciples in each of them? Yes, disciples, but not organizations. That is no part of my work. Of these, there are enough in all conscience. Organizations need men to manage them. They must seek power, money, influence. Often they struggle for domination and even fight. Could the gist of this mission of yours be summed up in a few words? Is it comparative religion you want to preach? It is really the philosophy of religion, the kernel of all its outward forms. All forms of religion have an essential and a non essential part. If we strip from them the latter, there remains the real basis of all religion, which all forms of religion possess in common. Unity is behind them all. We may call it God, Allah, Jehovah, the Spirit, love. It is the same unity that animates all life, from its lowest form to its noblest manifestation in man. It is on this unity that we need to lay stress, whereas in the West, and indeed everywhere, it is on the non-essential that men are apt to lay stress. They will fight and kill each other for these forms to make their fellows conform. Seeing that the essential is love of God and love of man, this is curious to say the least. I suppose a Hindu could never persecute. He never yet has done so. He is the most tolerant of all the races of men. Considering how profoundly religious he is, one might have thought that he would persecute those who believe in no God. The Jains regard such belief as sheer delusion, yet no Jain has ever been persecuted. In India, the Mohammedans were the first who ever took the sword. What progress does the doctrine of essential unity make in England? Here we have 1,000 sects. They must gradually disappear as liberty and knowledge increase. They are founded on the non-essential, which by the nature of things cannot survive. The sects have served their purpose, which was that of an exclusive brotherhood on lines comprehended by those within it. Gradually we reach the idea of universal brotherhood by flinging down the walls of partition which separate such aggregations of individuals. In England, the work proceeds slowly, possibly because the time is not yet ripe for it, but all the same, it makes progress. Let me call your attention to the similar work that England is engaged upon in India. Modern caste distinction is a barrier to India's progress. It narrows, restricts, separates. It will crumble before the advance of ideas. Yet some Englishmen, and they are not the least sympathetic to India nor the most ignorant of her history, regard caste as in the main beneficent. One may easily be too much Europeanized. You yourself condemn many of our ideals as materialistic. True, no reasonable person aims at assimilating India to England. The body is made by the thought that lies behind it. The body politic is thus the expression of national thought, and in India, of thousands of years of thought. To Europeanize India is therefore an impossible and foolish task. The elements of progress were always actively present in India. As soon as a peaceful government was there, these have always shown themselves. From the time of the Upanishads down to the present day, nearly all our great teachers have wanted to break through the barriers of caste, that is, caste in its degenerate state, not the original system. What little good you see in the present caste clings to it from the original caste, which was the most glorious social institution. Buddha tried to re-establish caste in its original form. At every period of India's awakening, there have always been great efforts made to break down caste. But it must always be we who build up a new India as an effect and continuation of her past, assimilating helpful foreign ideas wherever they may be found. Never can it be they. Growth must proceed from within. All that England can do is to help India to work out her own salvation. All progress at the dictation of another, whose hand is at India's throat, is valueless in my opinion. The highest work can only degenerate when slave labor produces it. Have you given any attention to the Indian National Congress movement? I cannot claim to have given much. My work is in another part of the field, but I regard the movement as significant and heartily wish it success. A nation is being made out of India's different races. I sometimes think they are no less various than the different peoples of Europe. In the past, Europe has struggled for Indian trade, a trade which has played a tremendous part in the civilization of the world. Its acquisition might almost be called a turning point in the history of humanity. We see the Dutch, Portuguese, French, and English contending for it in succession. The discovery of America may be traced to the indemnification the Venetians sought in the far distant West for the loss they suffered in the East. Where will it end? It will certainly end in the working out of India's homogeneity, in her acquiring what we may call democratic ideas. Intelligence must not remain the monopoly of the cultured few. It will be disseminated from higher to lower classes. Education is coming, and compulsory education will follow. The immense power of our people for work must be utilized. India's potentialities are great and will be called forth. Has any nation ever been great without being a great military power? Yes, said the Swami without a moment's hesitation. China has. Amongst other countries, I have traveled in China and Japan. Today, China is like a disorganized mob, but in the heyday of her greatness, she possessed the most admirable organization any nation has yet known. Many of the devices and methods we term modern were practiced by the Chinese for hundreds and even thousands of years. Take competitive examination as an illustration. Why did she become disorganized? Because she could not produce men equal to the system. You have the saying that men cannot be made virtuous by an act of parliament. The Chinese experienced it before you. And that is why religion is of deeper importance than politics, since it goes to the root and deals with the essential of conduct. Is India conscious of the awakening that you allude to? Perfectly conscious. The world perhaps sees it chiefly in the Congress movement and in the field of social reform, but the awakening is quite as real in religion, though it works more silently. The West and East have such different ideals of life. Ours seems to be the perfecting of the social state. Whilst we are busy seeing to these matters, Orientals are meditating on abstractions. Here has Parliament been discussing the payment of the Indian army in the Sudan. All the respectable section of the conservative press has made a loud outcry against the unjust decision of the government, whereas you probably think the whole affair not worth attention. But you are quite wrong, said the Swami, taking the paper and running his eyes over extracts from the conservative journals. My sympathies in this matter are naturally with my country, yet it reminds one of the old Sanskrit proverb, "You have sold the elephant, why quarrel over the goat?" India always pays. The quarrels of politicians are very curious. It will take ages to bring religion into politics. One ought to make the effort very soon all the same. Yes, it is worth one's while to plant an idea in the heart of this great London, surely the greatest governing machine that has ever been set in motion. I often watch it working, the power and perfection with which the minutest vein is reached, its wonderful system of circulation and distribution. It helps one to realize how great is the empire and how great its task. And with all the rest, it distributes thought. It would be worth a man's while to place some ideas in the heart of this great machine so that they might circulate to the remotest part. The Swami is a man of distinguished appearance, tall, broad, with fine features enhanced by his picturesque Eastern dress. His personality is very striking. By birth, he is a Bengali, and by education, a graduate of the Calcutta University. His gifts as an orator are high. He can speak for an hour and a half without a note or the slightest pause for a word. CSB.